identifying information in there. We don't need, this is not a confidential webinar, so this will be on Facebook. So don't put any of your loved ones' information in any questions. And if you do, we'll try to catch it and not say it. But just be cautious about that. I don't think we're live on Facebook yet, but for people on Facebook, questions go in the comments and they get to us by our wonderful IT people. So welcome, Dimitri. Super excited to have you here. Do you want to start by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Dimitri. I am a person in recovery. I am also the new recovery coaching supervisor for Herren Project. And I also work for the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery as an emergency department recovery coach, two organizations that I am extremely proud and extremely honored to be a part of. So just a little bit about myself. Just like everybody is different and everybody's recovery journey is unique, so is mine. My recovery journey has had some bumps along the way, but it's also had some pivotal moments that has shaped my recovery to what it is today. And I just kind of wanted to touch upon some of these moments. And one of them being the first one in 2011. I was in federal prison and I was in a program. We're getting ready to start a program called RDAP, which is the Residential Drug and Alcohol Program offered by the Bureau of Prisons. And this was my first true attempt to recovery, my first honest attempt in recovery. I have kind of, dabbled a little bit with AA and, 12-step fellowships in the past. I've been to treatment and detoxes in the past, but never for myself. It was always for a family member, for courts or, what have you. So this was my first true honest attempt to recovery. And it was a time in my life where I was kind of in a fork in the road because I was, because of situations within the prison, I wasn't so sure if I wanted to follow through with this program, so it was a moment where I had to make a decision whether I stick it out or I make a decision to go back to general population and just kind of finish my sentence and, and go that route. But I remember watching TV one day and a documentary came on and it was the 30 for 30 Unguarded by Chris Herren.
Yeah. And
it was one of those things that I connected with the message. And this is kind of the focus I want to, stay on, connection and hope. So I connected with this message and, it was kind of weird because I really didn't have that much in common with Chris, but it was his message. It was his story. It was his struggle. It was, somebody who had fulfilled his dream, right, and still struggled with addiction. So that gave me kind of the motivation and determination to complete the program. So that was, like I said, in 2011, I was released from prison in 2013. By this time, I had 6 years of abstinence. And I made a crucial mistake at that point because I didn't focus on my recovery. I came out of prison. I felt like I was kind of behind on the 8 ball. I had to, make up for lost time financially. I had to rebuild relationships. I had to, work, get back on my feet. So that was my main focus. And also it was during this time that I reconnected with a girl from high school who I fell deeply in love with. And we started, planning and started a life together. And, things like almost overnight became great. Work was good. I got engaged. We bought a house, started a business, so to me, it was like, okay, well, I arrived, right? Everything is good, going on almost 8 years of abstinence at this point. I fell in that trap, well, maybe I could drink, I never really had a problem with alcohol. It was mostly drugs that I struggled with in the past. So I could have a drink, and that didn't turn out very well. Within a matter of months, I was a full-blown alcoholic. And I struggled with alcohol now for about a year and a half at this point. And a decision was made to go to treatment. So I went to treatment in 2016. And again, another pivotal moment, because for the first time in my life, I was able to connect with a counselor. You know, in the past, I never was able to connect on a deeper level. Again, connection, right? And this counselor was also in recovery himself. So I felt like he understood me, like he gets it, you know, and he was like crazier than I was, you know. So I was like, hey, yeah. I said, and that gave me hope again. You know, first time it was with, you know, that documentary that, look, if he could make it through the other side, maybe so can I, you know. And this is the second time again that I had some hope, you know, that maybe I too can recover. And also at this time, a passion was kind of sparked within me that I wanted to maybe look at pursuing some kind of work within the recovery community, within the recovery field, because of this gentleman.
Yeah.
So when I got out of treatment, let me back up a little bit. Again, you know, coincidences. It's those little God moments, right? So during group one day, again, Unguarded comes on, and it was you know, at this time that, you know, my fiance at the time, you know, she was struggling. She was on the other side of it. You know, she was a family member now who didn't really know how to support me and didn't know how to process what was going on. So I remember getting on the phone with her that night and telling her, hey, look, there's this documentary called Unguarded. Maybe you should watch it. You know, I said, you know, I watched it for the second time today, and, you know, it gave me some hope, and, you know, maybe you could watch it too. And she did. And it gave her hope because she identified with the family side of it. You know, she identified with Heather. And so when I got out of treatment, two things happened. One, I decided to go back to school. I said, I'm going to go back to school, and I enrolled into the DARC program, which is a drug alcohol recovery counseling program here in Connecticut. And I was exposed to this idea of multiple pathways of recovery. And up until this point, I really didn't know much about recovery. I knew 12-step fellowships. I knew counseling and therapy. I had a little bit of understanding of MAT, which is medicated assisted therapies. But that was it, you know, very limited, you know, information that I had. So the more I learned, more passionate I became, you know, and I'm not that type of person that's going to go to, you know, a 12-step fellowship to try to rewrite the big book, right? So I had to find something to get involved in, somewhere to get involved in. And I was working with a therapist at the time as well, and she recommended CCAR, which is a Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. They have 5 recovery community centers throughout the state. It's a good place, good, safe place to kind of go and get involved, volunteer, give back. Everybody there is either in recovery or seeking recovery. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged. You know, I felt that sense of community, you know.
Huge part of recovery.
Yeah. And so I started volunteering. I was working full time, but one night a week they were open later. So I was able to go there, you know, three hours a week and kind of give back, clean up, set up for meetings, make outgoing phone calls, check in, you know, telephone recovery support was a big part of it. And I loved it. You know, I was like, wow, you know, for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, you know, and that was very important for me. So also at this time, through CCAR, I found out that Chris was speaking somewhere locally here in Connecticut. So me and my wife decided to go. And I remember, it's funny because I had this shirt on and it said "Hella Sober" on it. And after Chris spoke, you know, they had a little Q&A and then a little meet and greet. So we kind of went up and, you know, we connected over this shirt. You know, he was like, oh, from his time when he used to live out west, you know, that's kind of some of the slang and terminology they use. So, you know, we joked about it and we connected. We connected. My wife, he gave us his personal phone number. So since then, a relationship started forming, you know, and through our work and, you know, my wife and I started a nonprofit. We had done some fundraising for Herren Project. And, you know, through those events, we ended up meeting Bonnie, which is, you know, an incredible person and, you know, best friends with my wife almost now, you know, they speak regularly. And so again, it was that connection, that sense of hope, you know. And after about 9 months, I remember the volunteer coordinator coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Dimitri, you have enough hours volunteered that you could go to the Recovery Coach Academy and get your Recovery Coach certificate." And at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm going to school to get my degree. Do I really need a recovery coach? Not
Right.
really knowing what recovery coaching truly was. And but she convinced me. She said, look, she said, it's free. They're going to pay for it. Just go. And I went, and it completely changed my whole perspective. I was exposed to some foundational principles that challenged my beliefs. One of them being that there's multiple pathways to recovery, again, which I was already kind of struggling a little bit with. And another one being that you're in recovery when you say you are, right? Which was kind of foreign to me, because, I was like, how can that be?
Right.
So through that week of Recovery Coach Academy, it revolutionized my thinking, and I was sold. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Awesome.
And so with that being said, it's like I had to go back and define some of this terminology. What does it mean to be in recovery? And there's a lot of misconception, I think, even today, what recovery is. And we use terms like recovery and sobriety and abstinence kind of interchangeably, and they're not the same. So you could be in recovery and not be abstinent.
I
You
love
could be
that.
abstinent and not be in recovery.
Yep.
So to me, this was foreign. And I remember sitting with another colleague across the table, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I could get behind this concept. But it was very important for me to understand that. Because when I look back now in my recovery, my recovery process journey started, like I said, in 2011. I haven't been abstinent since 2011, but that is my process. So what is recovery, right? So, one definition is that it's a process of change, where some strives to be, live a self-directed life, improve his health and well-being, and strive to reach their full potential. So process of change, so that stuck with me, and abstinence is just that, abstinence.
Yep.
So it changed my whole outlook, and I wanted to learn more about it. And then we talked about terms like recovery coaching, and what is a coach and what is a recovery coach, and again, bringing back, and looking up definitions. And one that I really like is the definition of a coach. And the earliest date that the term coach was used was sometime in the 1500s. And it explained that a coach was a way to convey a valued person from where they were to where they want to go,
I like that.
So you picture, a horse and carriage, right? A coach, you're a valued person from where they are to where they want to go.
Yep.
And a recovery coach kind of, expands a little bit upon that. It's somebody that kind of, removes barriers, promotes recovery, and at the same time acts as a guide and mentor to somebody who's seeking recovery. Somebody who could walk hand in hand with somebody down this journey of recovery.
Right.
And how do we do that?
Right.
I don't know if I should keep going.
Yeah, you can keep going. We don't have any questions yet. And I'll just throw out there, you guys, we are accepting questions. If you have anything for Dimitri or me, feel free to put them in the chat. We actually do have one question that just came in. Are recovery coaches typically certified?
So yeah, there's different regulations and certifications for different states. So for example, here in the state of Connecticut, there is no state certification for recovery coach. There is a state certification called the Certified Peer Recovery Specialist, CPRS.
Yep.
But right now, even in the state of Connecticut here, they're in the process of kind of merging the two together and coming up with a brand new certification. So there's been some town halls going on how to go about that. And those of us that have the CPRS, are we grandfathered into this new certification? But At the same time, there's also designations. I know CCAR offers a recovery coach professional designation, which is a panel, an interview. It's about an hour long that you sit in front of the panel of other recovery coach professionals, and you kind of go through an interview process. They ask questions and scenarios and things like that.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, it's kind of controversial, right? Because I want to advocate to kind of protect the integrity of the role of a recovery coach. You know, so
Oh,
once you start getting into regulations and certifications, then it kind of takes away from the form, what the pure form of a recovery coach is. And you know, what are some of the roles? You know, so a role of recovery coach, you know, we're an ally, we're a motivator, we're a cheerleader, we're an, you know, an advocate, community organizer, a problem solver, a role model, a peer, you know, a friend and companion. So
And
these are,
there's a non-judgmental, this is what I've seen. There's a non-judgmental approach that recovery coaches take where there aren't any expectations, right? Where a lot of the other roles that our loved ones, you know, interact with, oftentimes there are expectations, and that in judgment sometimes too, unfortunately. And that in itself puts a barrier around people. This is why people don't come back, or they drop out, right? Whereas I feel like a recovery coach, you have an easier time keeping people engaged, because you're not asking anything of them. You're just asking what they need of you for the most part.
and that's a great point. So one of my first questions is, how can I help you in your recovery today? Right? What does recovery look like or mean to you? You know, what my definition of recovery might not be the same as yours, you know? So asking those questions and how can I help you get to that point, you know, is, you know, very important, because I know for myself, you know, having somebody tell me what they think I should do, I'm like, you know.
No, thanks. That's the human reaction. And I'm saying this for the benefit of the families. The most of us humans, when someone tells us what we have to do, our reaction is to get defensive and be contrary, right? Yeah. And oftentimes when you're dealing with people who have active substance use, right, developmentally, they're kind of a lot of times still stuck in more of like the teenage mentality, where this is even worse, right? So oftentimes we get real hard pushback, right? And so as you were talking, what I'm thinking is I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. For the sake of our families, because what I hear from families oftentimes is, but shouldn't we have an expectation that they don't use? And my answer is, well, has that worked? Right. So I'm going to drink some water.
Yeah.
And you run with that.
So, I mean, so again, you know, the 4 goals of a recovery coach is to promote recovery, remove barriers, connect with the recovery support, with recovery support services and the recovery community as a whole, and encourage hope, optimism, and healthy living. You know, plant that seed of hope, you know, that recovery is possible, that anybody can recover. You know, that's something that you know, for years I struggled with. You know, I didn't have that hope that recovery was possible, you know. And how do we do that? You know, so there's this picture of a 3-legged stool that was you know, presented to us at training. And you know, the 3-legged stool is active listening, managing our own stuff, and asking good questions. All the while treating the recovery as a resource. You know, I'm not the expert on Kristin. You know, I don't know what Kristin's needs are. I don't know what Kristin's wants are. You know, Kristin is the expert on Kristin. You know, and until Kristin can tell me how I can help her, it's not going to work. Right. You know, so what does recovery look like to you? You know, what have you tried in the past? Have you had any sobriety in the past? You know, what worked, what didn't work? You know, let's make those adjustments.
Right. And do I want it? Right. That's one of the, when I'm working with people, one of my first questions are, do you want to be sober? Is that a goal of yours?
Exactly.
Right? Oftentimes it's, especially in the early stages of recovery, that might not necessarily be the goal. Oftentimes the first goal, and you said this, well, no, I don't want to use like this, or I don't want to use heroin or pills, but I don't want to be substance free, right?
Mhm.
Or I want to learn to be able to manage my alcohol normally, right? We hear this all the time. And if that's their goal, you got to meet them there, because you can't force somebody to want abstinence if they don't want abstinence.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because I was faced with this recently. I was working with a recovery, and this is another terminology that we use, right? Recovery. We don't call them clients or patients. We kind of bring that power differential on a, level level field. So recovery coach, recovery. And he said, no, man, I don't want to stop drinking. He goes, I just want to stop getting DUIs. I want to stop going to the ED. I want to stop, falling down the stairs. I said, okay, well, if you don't want to completely stop the drink, what is an acceptable amount of alcohol that you want to, consume? Let's make a smart goal here. Let's put it on paper. Let's come up with a plan. And he said, I think I could do, 4 to 6 beers a day. He said, I think I'll be okay with that. I said, all right, that's great. Let's write that goal down and, work towards it and see how it comes out. 3 days later, I get that phone call, yup, didn't work.
Can't do it. Yep.
I'm 12, I'm
Right.
12 beers in.
Sometimes we have to let them fail at whatever their plan is, and then help them come up with a new plan.
And that is the importance of the connection piece, right? So my number one priority, my number one goal is to make a connection. I meet a lot of recoveries in the ED. They just had a crisis, that they're there, and the window is small, and they might be seeking to go to detox, and we're kind of making phone calls to see what kind of detox beds are available, if there is any, and if not, then what? So regardless what the outcome is in the ED, my number one priority and goal is to make that connection, so that person can answer my call the next morning, feel safe and comfortable enough to even call me. So that and if they do fail in their goal, they could feel comfortable to call and say, hey man, you know what, I don't think I could do the 4, 6 beers. I think we need to revisit this goal and set new goals.
Absolutely. So we have 2 questions. First one is, do you have to be in recovery housing to be assigned a recovery coach? I can field this one. No, you do not have to be in recovery housing to be assigned a recovery coach in the general world. There are many different ways and many different places that offer recovery coaching. Some treatment centers do. There's some community organizations that do. So you have to find out the resources in your general community. Herren Project, the scholarships that we offer for recovery housing, those individuals receive a recovery coach. The only reason why we do it that way, so in Herren Project, yes, you do need to be in recovery housing to be assigned a recovery coach. The only reason why we do it that way is because we're just not big enough and don't yet have the resources to be able to open it up outside of that, but we're getting there. That's in the works. Hopefully that is in our strategic plan. So hopefully within the next year or 2, you're going to start to see more and more and more of that here with Herren Project. So we do have a commitment to that. So just so you're aware, keep your eyes peeled. Hopefully that will be happening soon. We also have another question. Can a parent of an alcoholic become a recovery coach and help their adult child? This person has 15 years of sobriety.
It's definitely recovery coaching. I mean, we had those questions come up, I think, at some of our trainings too. And recovery coaching, anybody is welcome to become a recovery coach. Ally, friends, people in recovery. It's basically you're a resource broker. You're there to support, motivate, encourage. I mean, to recovery coach a loved one. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So my answer, I mean, as a licensed clinician, a master's level licensed clinician, I would not treat a family member.
Yeah.
So regardless of how much knowledge that I may have, I want to be I want to love my family member. If it's, God forbid, we'll say it was my child. If it was my child, I want to be his mom. I don't want to be his recovery coach. I want someone else to take on that role because they're going to be way more effective at it than I am, because I'm going to be emotional. So, and when I'm emotional, I'm not going to be able to make good choices. I'm not going to be able to stay neutral. None of that can happen when you're emotionally involved in a situation. So my answer to that would be become a certified recovery coach. The information that you learn will help you in your interactions with your child, but do not be their recovery coach, right? So find them another recovery coach, find them other people to support them as well. But all the information you can get as a parent, the more effective you're going to be. And that studies show this. Studies actually prove that family members that learn, those of us that learn the most that we can about substance use disorder, our loved ones have a better outcome typically, right? So the more you learn, the better. It's never wasted. So another question, how long do people usually stay with a recovery coach?
So, I mean, it's case by case, right? I know here in Herren Project, we usually work with a recovery for 7 weeks. We're thinking are in the process of maybe extending some of that. In my role in CCAR, anywhere from 30 days to, I'm still working with recoveries after a year. Is it the same intensive kind of, interaction? No, obviously during those early days of recovery, the first few weeks, it's a little more intense. I call recoveries every day for the first 10 days just to make sure they're stabilized and they have the resources and are, getting the treatment that they need to get stabilized. Then after that, it becomes a weekly phone call. Then once you're working with somebody for a little while, from day one, I want to start building a support network around it. I don't want the recovery to rely on just myself, so start building a support network around them, start building recovery capital, which is another term, and I can explain a little bit about that. And then once they get involved and get engaged and connected with some of these recovery support services, then I can start taking a little step back. And instead of a weekly phone call, it's a bi-weekly phone call. Now, I mean, if I'm working with somebody for a year, it's, just like once a month, I'll check in or they'll check in and, see how they're going, if there's any adjustments they need to make.
Right. Awesome. This is a great question. And I hear this a lot. Is a recovery coach the same thing as a sponsor?
No. So that's so what are those? What is our lane, right? What is our role? And what is a recovery coach and what a recovery coach is not? So a sponsor, their role is to take somebody through the 12 steps of their fellowship. I know for myself, and I had a great sponsor who used to beat the big book into me, the AA is the only way and no other way, and he was the type of person, a little old school where he felt that I needed to call him. He would not call me, and there being in early recovery, I mean, that was one of my biggest challenges is picking up that phone and reaching out to somebody, so that's why I think recovery coaching is great, because we actually call the recoveries. We know that. I know that. I still struggle at times picking up that phone, and if I leave it up to a recovery, an early recovery, to pick up the phone and call me on a regular basis, it's not going to work, so me being able to kind of reach out and check in with that recovery on a consistent basis and let them know that, hey, I'm here for you, man. I care. I want to see you succeed. How can I help? What can we do? You have a whole team behind you. You have a whole organization in your corner. We believe in you. Let us help you. We are here for you.
Yep. I think in the AA is with a sponsor, there's a little bit more sort of expectation and rules like we talked about in the beginning, whereas recovery coaching has none of that. It's all pathways to recovery. And I'm going to say that again, because that is one of the key differences, right? This idea 10 years ago, all pathways to recovery didn't exist in this field. So this is a newer concept. And basically what it means is I get to decide how I want to recover. I get to decide how I want to get to maybe abstinence or harm reduction. And harm reduction is when we get somebody to either use less or use safer, right? And all of those things are a win. And I want to say that, and I want to have all of you parents hear this, or parents, loved ones, spouses, whoever you are, all of those things are a win. This doesn't mean that you don't get to put your boundaries around them based on what you will accept in your presence, right? But whatever they're deciding for themselves if it is safer than what they were doing the week before, we're winning. We're moving closer to recovery, right? And we will hang in there. A recovery coach will hang in there with them through that process instead of saying, call me back when you're sober.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's a game changer, I think, when it comes to treating substance use disorder. As a social worker, I've actually been doing this for a while. Like, I've never turned somebody away because they were actively using. I'll sit in it with them. The only thing that I will ask is they not come to session in an inebriated state. Okay. Cause then there's no work that's going to be done. Right. But other than that, I'll sit with them and I'll sit in it and we'll talk about the dangers and we'll talk about what they can do differently next week. And that's what recovery coaches are doing. And again, game changer. How do people go about getting connected to a recovery coach?
So again, like you said before, right? There's different organizations out there that do have recovery coaching available. A lot of treatment centers, a lot of outpatient, a lot of treatment providers. Here in Herren Project, we offer recovery coaching that's tied to our scholarship program of sober living. Another way you could, if you are looking to get a recovery coach, ccar.us. Right on their website, there's telephone recovery support. You could sign up right on their website and you will get a phone call from a recovery coach on a weekly basis and start working with a recovery coach that way as well. It's a free resource and it's offered to anybody. Again, that's website is ccar.us.
Right. And if you don't know in your community, reach out to the local coalitions. Most of them will be able to tell you what's offered in your community, because it's different in every community and it's different in every state. And different states, like Dimitri said earlier, have different licensing requirements, certification requirements. It's different. Hopefully eventually they'll be sort of more of a unified, but right now it's very different in different places. Anything else you can think of, Dimitri, that might be, interesting to add for our families? Even, one of the things that you said in the very beginning that struck me that I wanted to kind of come back to was when you said, my first honest attempt at recovery, right? I want to touch upon that a little bit because I feel like most people go through this when they're trying to get into recovery, when they're trying to find sobriety or whatever their recovery process is. They go through this difference between honestly an honest attempt and not an honest attempt. Could you just elaborate on what that means a little bit more?
So for me, it was internalizing this desire to stay clean and sober, and I struggled with that for a while because I loved alcohol and drugs, that was one of my, the only coping skill I knew, was drugs and alcohol. But the consequences continued to get worse and worse and worse and worse. So finally, I reached a point where I was like, I need to do something. I can't keep living this way. I'm going to die, or I'm going to continue destroying my relationships. I'm going to be alone, so I had to make a decision, and I had to make that decision for myself. I couldn't make it for my children or for my wife or for my mother. I had to make it for myself. And until I reached that point where I kind of exhausted all my attempts to control and manage my use, I came to a realization that I could not drink or use successfully. I proved it over and over again. And it's a point that I think is different for everybody. I know people that they display all the characteristics of an alcoholic. They'll catch their first DUI, spend the night in jail, and never touch alcohol again. And then there's people like myself that will chase that feeling to the gates of hell. And it's those individuals that you just got to be patient with and just show them, hey man, look, I care, man, I'm here. You know what I mean? And just let them know that.
Other way. Yeah. And this leads me to, I always like to educate where I can. There's a difference between problem use and substance use disorder. And problem use, this is why working with teens can be so difficult, because problem use could look like substance use disorder, but isn't necessarily substance use disorder. So what's the difference? The difference is when the consequences come, do you stop? which is kind of a crappy way to have to find out whether or not you have it, but it's kind of all we have, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I partied like a rock star. I tell people this all the time. My ex-husband and I both did. And one day I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to make, $7 an hour at the local bagel joint. I want to make something of my life. So I was just like, I got to stop this. I stopped. I went to college. He didn't. He couldn't. Right. There was a difference between the two of us. What that difference is, we don't 100% know yet why, but most likely it has something to do with trauma. It has genetic components. It's probably an interaction of all of those things, right? But consequences is the key. And I always like to point that out too, because what did Dimitri just say? What helped him move towards recovery? Consequences. So when, as family members, right, we come in and we're removing the consequences, what are we actually doing? Are we helping them move towards recovery, or are we assisting them in staying stuck in their use, right? So you always got to ask yourself this, because if I got a DUI tomorrow, right, based on the way I know my brain works, I would probably never drink again. It wouldn't even be a thought in my mind, right? So when that happens to a loved one of mine, I want to give them that opportunity. I'm going to hire a fancy lawyer to try to get them out of the charges so they never do it again, right? And they can go on with their life. This doesn't work with somebody who has substance use disorder. All it does is teach them that there's no consequences. And like Dimitri said, he wasn't using drugs and alcohol because he felt like, being a jerk or whatever. He was using drugs and alcohol because his brain needed the drugs and alcohol to manage the stress level, right? So if we're going to make that easy by removing consequences, it's not going to stop, right?
And plus we have this like built-in forgetter, it's like, after a certain amount of time, we tend to forget how bad it was, and that's the trap I fell into during my last relapse, where I had, 3 years of sobriety again. And here I was again, not really engaged in recovery. I was a little more than I was in the past, but I didn't have that strong support network. And I don't mean family, friends, because they're there, and they would do anything. My wife is my number one supporter. I love her to death, and vice versa. But like you said, and this kind of ties into, can you recovery coach your child, right? When I struggle, the last person I'm thinking about reaching out to for support is my family members, because I don't want to upset them. I don't want them to think that's, I don't want to scare them. I love them. I want to kind of shield them from that, Yeah. But if I don't have anybody else to reach out to, then I get trapped in my head, right? So then I don't express these negative feelings that I have. So now I keep replaying them in my head. And if I fail to express that stuff, I will convince myself that a drink's not going to kill me. It wasn't that bad last time. This time's going to be different. And that is the trap I fell into again. And, 2 days later, I'm clinging to life at a hospital, and here's my wife and, here's me. Like, how did I get here? I just wanted to get one drink. And again, it was at this time that, my wife, she didn't know who to reach out to, right? So she reached out to Chris, she reached out to Herren Project, she reached out to Kevin. And, I remember getting that phone call, and, Kevin, who was the executive director back then, asked me 2 questions. He said, first, do you want help? Do you want to get better? And second, how far have you gotten on your steps? I'm like, steps. I said, I don't know, step 3. He said, I got the perfect place for you. And he's, Herren Project saved my life, because it allowed me an opportunity to really dive into this work and look at what was really, at the root cause of this stuff. And this time truly build a support network around me. So when I do feel like I'm struggling, I could pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I'm struggling. I'm scared. I'm lonely. I'm anxious. I feel like drinking, where before, I feel like embarrassed to express that, because on the outside, everything is great. But then inside, I still have that inner turmoil. And if I don't have somebody that could understand that could, that gets it, that's been there, that has felt that same emotion, it's tough.
That's also not emotionally attached to that, right? Like as a parent, I know my son's 15. I mean, he so far has talked to me, but I also know I'm not always that person, right? From parents all the time, I hear them say things like, but I want to be that person. I know we want to be, but we gotta throw that idea out and not feel bad that we're not that person, right? Because typically speaking, there's too much emotional attachment. They don't want to disappoint us. Right. There's also a big part of looking into your mother's eyes and knowing you're breaking her heart, or your wife's eyes. That is
Yeah.
so hard to do. So we have to make sure that our loved ones have a support system that's outside of us. And please don't put that expectation on them. Try to be understanding that we're not your person, right? We're not always going to be that person for them. There are other people out there that can fit that better. We have two more questions. One, is there typically a fee associated with recovery coaching services? I mean, that's different depending on where you go. So yes, there's going to be a fee, an exorbitant fee in some places, and other places it'll be free. So it depends on where you go and what you're looking at. Herren Project, all the services we offer are free. So other question is, you want to share this with someone? Is there a way to do that after? Yes. All of these lunch and learns, all of the webinars that we do all go up onto the Herren Project YouTube channel after. They also do go on our website. So you can find them in either, or maybe even both places. I think what goes up on our website probably isn't up there forever, but it will forever be on the Herren Project YouTube channel. So share away. You can use it, you can send it, you can watch it, whatever. We want you guys to be promoting as much information as possible, so we can do our best to start to overcome some of our societal issues with substance use. So please, any other questions, throw them out there. We're taking them, we're open. There was something else you said too, Dimitri, that I had sort of earmarked that now I'm having trouble remembering what it was. Can you think of anything else that might be helpful to mostly family members?
I think I want to again stress the importance of connection, and recovery coaching is not a cure for addiction by any means. I think it's a valuable tool to be in partnership with, treatment and clinical services and, medical professionals. And, but connection is the key, because I know for myself, when I was in active addiction, my disease wants me disconnected, wants me withdrawn, wants me isolated, wants me stuck in my head, so connection is the key for me. The more layers of support I have, the better chances I have to stay and maintain my recovery.
That was actually what it was. I was gonna say that one of the ideas out there today is that the opposite of active addiction is connectedness, social connectedness, right? Because in active use, it's a lonely place to be.
Yeah, and that's where the resource broker role of the recovery coach comes in, right? So having this information and have these different resources available where you could present to the recovery and say, okay, you might not like AA, you might not feel like AA is a good fit for you. However, there's all this other stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a adventure recovery. They get together once a week or once a month and they go jump out of airplanes. I mean, that's their way of connecting with each other. There's a lot of secular programs out there like Smart Recovery, LifeRing. There's a lot of faith-based programs out there like Celebrate Recovery and Refuge Recovery. There's a lot of, again, 12-step fellowships. There's MAT, harm reduction, yoga recovery, Phoenix.
I was just going to say there's fitness communities, and we have one here. Our team, Herren Project here, is a fitness community, and a lot of people are in recovery that run.
So having all that knowledge and being equipped with this and being able to, present this stuff to somebody. Okay, well, this is not working. Let's try this. How does this sound? You seem like an athletic person. You seem like you like to go on hikes and work out, and maybe this is a good fit for you. But the one thing that they all have in common is connection. Again,
right. And my suggestion to all of you out there as family member is when they say to you, well, I don't like AA, it doesn't work for me. right? For whatever the reason is in the moment. And most likely, if your loved ones are still stuck in active use, you're probably going to hear them say that in the beginning. It's a very scary place to be when you're actively using. Not that it's not a welcoming community if you're actively using, it's more here that's the problem for most people. But my suggestion to you isn't to say, well, that's what you should do because that's what they say you should do, and start harping and pushing because it's only going to drive them further away. What you should say is, okay, so if that's not a good fit, what do you think will be? Have you looked into it? Have you thought about it? Do you know what else is out there? Let's sit down. Why don't we Google it? Why don't we see what else is out there? Why don't you try some other things? Right? And disconnect from the idea of abstinence, which is really hard for us family members to do. As a family member myself, as an ex-wife, I had a hard time with that. I want to run the show because if he would have just done what I told him to, we would have been fine the whole time, right? Doesn't work. Didn't work for me, hasn't worked for anybody ever, but I get it because we're anxious and our anxiety is off the charts and we just want to feel good again, to feel safe again, right? But trying to take control doesn't work. So the more you can say, okay, well, that sucks. So what are you going to do about it? And let them drive the bus, the better the outcome will end up being, even if what you hear you don't like, right? We got to learn to take a step back and do our own work on our own recovery because we kind of become unwell also in trying to control that. We become addicted to them going to treatment and the loved one getting better. Legitimately, there have been brain scans done on this. I always like to make sure that every family member I work with knows this. When they did studies on this. I think it was the University of Texas that did studies on it, where they did brain scans of individuals who struggle with substance use disorder. And when they were thinking about the drug of choice, the same part of their brain lit up as when a family member was thinking about getting them to treatment.
Wow.
How crazy is that? We literally become addicted, which makes sense because we do crazy things, right? Anyone that's ever loved somebody that has active substance use disorder, we do crazy things sometimes. And I say that not to be judgmental. I say that to normalize it, right? We have to recognize that we're not that well either. And I want to take that word codependency and turn it into a positive. Okay, because it's such a negative. I want it to be like we are just fierce lovers of our loved ones, and we're going to do anything to try to protect and save them. And then I want us to learn that that doesn't work, and I want us to change our behavior and do it differently. Right? What do you think, Dimitri? What did you need from your loved ones, from the people around you? What would have been the best thing that they could have done and given you?
I think this time around, and it's been an extremely extreme help, was that she allowed me, my wife allowed me to take control, not control, but take charge of my recovery, instead of her trying to control my recovery, and she was doing it, not meaning to and not knowing that she was doing it, but she wanted, she wanted to protect me, right? She wanted to make sure I was okay, so allowing me and taking that step back and allowing me to, engage and become an active participant in my recovery, I think was one of the biggest game changers for myself. And then her seeing me being an active participant in my recovery gives her that much, security that, I'm doing what I need to be doing, and she's focusing on her recovery. So that's important, so we are both healing and we are both recovering, and then we could come together as two, recovering individuals instead of one trying to kind of, control each other, and I think, the work that she's done on herself has not only benefited her, but it's helped me, and it has benefited our, our marriage as well, and our relationship, and being involved in some of those spousal support groups, that Herren Project has offered were pivotal, because she finally saw that she wasn't alone either, in this, because addiction is a family disease. It touches everybody in its path.
Right. And I hear that time and time again in the groups that I've run over the years. It's just so nice to know I'm not alone, because we feel alone too. I know the person struggling typically feels very alone, but so do the family members.
Absolutely.
And the stigma keeps us quiet, which keeps us feeling alone, right? Because we don't want to tell anybody. We don't want to share our business with anybody else. And it's a very dangerous place to be, because this warps things for all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a human being and you're struggling with something and you leave it inside here, our own perception is going to warp it, me included. No matter how many years of social work I do, no matter how much work I do, I still now know I have to reach out to my support system when there's something getting kicked around in here and be like, am I off base here? Right? Does this sound accurate? And a lot of times it's not.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to do that work too. And just in case there's anybody watching today that doesn't know that we offer this, you can go right onto our website. We have multiple different support groups that you can join. They're all free, so you don't have to pay a dime. They're all virtual. It looks just like this. It's a link you log on to, and they're all run by licensed clinicians. So there's a lot of support. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot, there's just so many things that come out of that. And we're not the only gig either. There's Al-Anon, there's Families Anonymous, there's Learn to Cope, there's Magnolia New Beginnings. If you're not a part of that support group, get on it. It's a Facebook group and you can ask questions, and there's support there 24 hours a day. It's awesome. So there's so many different opportunities for you guys. Oh, and we also at Herren Project offer 15-minute consultations for families. So, and that is with a clinician, a licensed clinician. So you can get a phone consult for free, just trying to figure out what direction to go in. So
yeah, that's a great resource.
Yeah. I think it's been a game changer for us in working with individuals, because when you can make the family unit start to heal, addiction's a family disease, then we can't just target one person, right? We have to target the whole family. So.
And that's been one of the biggest concerns that I've heard, working in the recovery community, that, okay, well, the person that suffers with a substance use disorder, when it's time and they go get the help, there's all this stuff for them. But then what about the family? What about the wife? What about the mother? What about the father? What about the siblings, the friends, there's, so we need to continue strengthening that community as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the family program actually developed because when Bonnie and I were primarily doing treatment in the very beginning stages of Herren Project, we found that we were working with family members probably, 70% of the time. And that if we hung in there with them for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and helped educate them, eventually the loved one would end up reaching out to us. So that was when we were like, wow, if we're really going to help individuals, we've got to work with the families. So I'm saying that right now because I want all of you guys out there to recognize how important you are. You think you have no power, but you actually do, but you have to start with you. You can't start with them. If you're focusing only on them, you're not going to get anywhere. You got to start with you. So anything else you can think of, Dimitri?
I think we covered a lot. That was a lot of information.
It was a lot of information in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you came on today.
Thank you so much.
Definitely we'll have you back on at some point. And for those of you out there, we're here every month, the first Tuesday of every month at noon with usually a different guest. So hope to see you again next month. Okay.
Thanks,
Dimitri.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.